we still have Lauren here.
Hi.
Hi, Lauren.
Hi, this is me. I'm still here.
Yeah.
For some reason.
And this is another episode of the Lore Foundry. Likely going to be what is equivalent to like a mini-sode, but we'll see how long it goes.
Yeah.
In the event that this is, you're looking at the length of this and it's like over an hour long. Turns out it's not a mini-sode.
I'm also here too. I moved
Greg's
my
here.
chair, so now I'm close to the microphone.
Yay!
So I'm an actual participant.
Now I feel like
hello
this is
to
more-
people in the future.
Yeah, this is more like an interview now. I feel like I'm being
Yeah.
interviewed. I've got two
You're
people
being
across from me,
interviewed.
and I'm not really sure how I feel about it.
What's your favorite color?
Green
What's your favorite food?
pizza?
What is the average airspeed of an unladen swallow?
God damn it! I don't know. Josh has a T-shirt that has the whole thing on it. I should have brought it.
Was it an African or European swallow? Pete's sake. So you're a writer,
Yes.
are you not?
I
Wonderful.
fancy myself one. Yet to be determined.
Well, do you write?
I do, which I guess technically means that you are a writer.
Look
If you
at
write,
that.
you are a writer.
You perhaps aren't. Are you published?
I am not. That is
You're
what an
not
author
published.
is. So there's your
Okay,
difference.
so
A
that's-
writer is a
So you're a writer,
writer.
not an author.
Yes.
That's good. 'cause
The
now
end
I
goal
feel-
is to be an author.
I feel way less pretentious saying that I'm a writer than
That's
if
great.
If it's just
I was
like,
gonna
oh,
be pedantic in like the non-pretentious way. It's like, I write things, therefore I'm a writer.
"Ugh,
I mean,
you
yeah,
have
I
a ton of
guess,
friends."
but you can say it with a different inflection.
I have a ton of friends, and I'm really active on social media. Telling people how dumb they are. In any
Does a
case, so you're.
fanfic count as being published.
Hey,
Nope.
there have been some fantastic stories
you
that have
published by a
started as
publisher?
fanfics.
Can't
Like
you
50
be your own
Shades.
publisher?
You know what? Fuck 50 Shades. This is my one F-bomb
That's what
in
it's
this,
about.
in this podcast.
We're
You
PG-13
don't need
now.
to hold yourself back.
50 Shades of Grey is a curse upon this land.
Oh.
That is my personal quest, is to just trash talk it as much as possible. Sorry if anyone out there really likes
In
it.
any
You can read
case,
what you like. It's
it's-
okay.
That's exact. That's exact.
It's pretty
That's
absurd
exact.
that they just didn't edit it down before publishing it. That's the thing that blows me away the most.
You want to hear my favorite 50 Shades of Grey story?
Sure.
It had recently been published. It was out on the shelves.
All right, that's the story. I'm kidding.
Yes, right. We're done. Wipe our hands of it. Josh and I were walking through Target really late at night.
Mm-hmm.
It had to have been like past 11 o'clock. And that's late for me because I'm old. And we saw it sitting on a shelf. I beelined straight towards it. I grabbed it. I flipped it open to a random page. And as we were walking through Target, I just decided I was going to read out loud from that
Oh,
random page.
God.
And it was horrendous. If you ever want to feel, if there are writers listening to this and you want to feel better about yourself as a writer, go read a random page of 50 Shades. Find a copy of it somehow. Don't buy it. Don't support
You
this.
can go to Greg's basement. He's got a copy
I
just
actually
laying
have
there.
a
Okay, great.
Do you-
Borrow-
okay.
Email Greg.
Yeah.
Ask him to send it to you.
Because I don't. It's a curio. There's a whole story about why we have it. The last place that I lived in was, I mean, it was like a college trap house, right? Like I actually,
Things just collected over the years with tenants.
Yeah, and I knew I found the place I was going to be living like a couple weeks before actually moving in there. Like that's the kind of level of thing. And after moving in, we got a package that was addressed to one of the former residents, and we told them. They never came. They never picked it up. And then after like a couple months,
So they committed a crime.
After
Yes.
After a couple
This is a
months.
federal crime.
This is a crime. I'm a felon. After a couple months, we
I
were
don't think that makes you a
all like
felon.
drunk, and we're like, all right, like let's see what this is, and it opened up. It was 50 Shades, and
So
it
it
was,
might not
it
have
was
been
a
you.
great time.
Everyone's drunken memory is
It-
hazy.
yeah.
Collectively, you're felons, but individually,
Who can
you
say
share
who ripped
partial,
the paper? Who,
Exactly.
who
You
You
opened
share
it?
partial
Yeah.
guilt.
I'm just saying,
That, and if nobody presses charges, are you really a felon?
Harlequin romances can be pretty fun. They're like they can be so bad it's good. All right.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. But this,
This is
one,
so
this
bad
one
that
is
it's
so
still
bad, it's
bad.
bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like. Never mind. I have no words. In any case, so you're an actual writer,
Yes.
and clearly publishing doesn't mean shit.
No, there are some really crappy stories that have been published.
Exactly. Therefore, you're as legitimate as whoever that fucking
Just
lady
anyone.
was. You're
don't
more
remember
legit
her
because
name.
you don't write shit.
You have
And
taste.
you have
I
taste.
That's all
really,
that
I
matters.
really hope I do.
We know
Yeah.
you have taste. I know you, Lauren. You've got some taste.
Oh, good.
Have you
Uh,
read anything though?
Actually, I have. No, because she wrote the pit part of
Oh, yeah.
of my dungeon one time, and I really
Yeah, we
enjoyed
did
it.
part of our campaign. I've written more of it now.
Have you?
Yeah.
I'm actually really interested in seeing that. Perhaps at some point in time, we can publish that to the internet somewhere if she's
Sure.
cool with it. In
Yeah,
any case, you
absolutely.
can find her on stuff. I mean, if you want to out yourself, out your medias of
Hell yeah,
socialness,
shameless self-promotion.
where you publish this out to.
They're the first 5 chapters of my first book. So what I'm writing right now and what I've been writing for the majority of my life is a trilogy of books, and the first 5 chapters of book 1 are published quote quote online on inkshares.com. And you can just go up into the search bar and search for The Elements Trilogy. Or you could search for my name, Lauren. You could just tack that onto the back. My published author name is Lauren Drube. Drube.
Oh, true. Yeah.
Drube.
That's right.
So if it ever does end up on a shelf someday and you see the name Lauren Drube on there, then you'll be like, hey, I heard that girl one time on this podcast. Cool.
Right? Because this podcast is totally going to be more popular than the book. I think here's an interesting thing I think about writing, especially, now more than, prior. Because, like, Tolkien had, like, wrote most of The Hobbit, and he's like, I got to change some stuff. So he rewrote it. And, like, obviously there's a lot of editing that goes into that kind of thing. But as you're publishing things to the internet, like kind of the way you are, you don't really get a chance to go back and edit unless you do it again, which I think is really interesting.
Which I have done. I posted the first book in its entirety on Inkshares to start, and then Josh was like, why did you do that? Don't give away all of it at once. No, you have to give away 5 chapters, and then people will want more. So I was like, all right, cool. You're obviously smarter at this than I am. So that's why I limited it back to 5 chapters.
Josh, let me feed your ego. You're obviously super smart. So book 1 is done. Yeah,
book 1 is done. Book 2 is done. And book 3 is about, I'd say, a third of the way done. I have done multiple edits of book 1. I've lost track at this point.
Over and over again?
Yeah, just over and over again. From front cover to back
keep
cover.
Polishing, man.
Yeah, and it's the same argument that I'm sure writers all over have with themselves. Is it ever going to be ready? Is it ever going to be acceptable for me to show this to another pair of eyes? And you never think it is. Ever.
Right.
You're always, and it doesn't matter what you're creating, whether it's something for a tabletop role-playing game, you're always going to be worried that you're going to present this thing that you're super excited about, and people are going to be like, well, this is lame.
Right. But, I mean, the thing that you share is always going to be better than the thing that you don't share.
Yes.
Right? At least in my opinion, because at least it's out in the world and people can enjoy it or not, and that's their own deal.
Yes.
So cool. You've got some stuff out, and if a person were to inquire how to read the rest of it, how would they go about and do that?
Ooh.
So if I was like, yo, L Dog, can I read the rest of your book?
Like,
do I have to pay you for this?
Ooh. Honestly,
is
no.
This like a Patreon pay for access to your Google Drive?
These are things that I never considered ever. I never thought someone would read the first 5 chapters and reach out to me and be like, "Cool, I want to read the rest." If I got an email like that, I never thought anybody would
listen to this podcast, but hey, we have at least 13 people, I think.
There's at least 13.
Oh my god. Amazing.
Amazing indeed.
Yeah, I mean,
hello, all 13 of you.
I can give you guys my authorship email address that I have, and if people from this podcast for some reason go out and read the first 5 chapters of mine and for some reason think it's really good, then yeah.
Again, people thought 50 Shades of Grey was good. You've got a chance.
Would it be connected to your profile on Inkshares at all?
I don't know if they list contact information on Inkshares. No.
Well, in any case, we'll have it here.
I think it lists my state.
It'll be in the description down in the doobly-doo. Just kidding. That's a Matt Caldwell thing. In any case, so this is a world building podcast. Let's talk about some world building.
Yeah.
And you listen to our podcast. You're one of the 13.
Between
you and your husband, that's 2 of them.
Oh.
Also, she's married to Josh, the one who asked about the Magic Items episode. So
he was very happy that you guys did that episode.
Yeah.
It made him feel really good.
I mean, I was really excited to do that episode.
I've had more ideas since then, by the way, if you want just a little extra.
This is for you, Josh.
This is for you, Josh. So, particularly in something like D&D, I think it'd be really cool. There's a state of it being on or off or something like that. That's related to criticals or not. So it could be you get a critical hit and then it's has a really powerful effect, but now it's discharged and it's not going to be used and it's not going to be magical anymore, or it could be the opposite. That's something that I think would be cool because I like the idea of having bittersweet rewards where it's I did the sweet critical, but now my sword isn't magic anymore for the day or whatever.
Yeah,
and
but
and there's still 3 ghosts for me to fight.
Yeah, but you just obliterated that ghost.
Yeah, I think that's really fun. That's another idea that I've had recently.
So take that, Josh, and put it into your far future DM pocket.
I wasn't there that's what I'm swiping through my phone for right now. I sent you and Courtney and Josh in a group chat a list of like horrible magical items that I had come up with, just completely useless ones.
Oh, I think you did.
Yeah, and I'm trying to remember where it was,
at.
because that's always fun too. Like, you give your
Yeah.
characters a really cool magical item, and it turns out to be, it's magical, but not in any way that's really useful.
Yep.
Yeah,
There's
always fun.
Xanathar's Guide came with like a list of common magic items, and there's like a wand of smiles, and so you can use it, and someone needs to make a charisma saving throw in order to prevent, smiling.
To stop from
And
frowning.
and so once you use all the charges, you roll d20, and on a 1, it turns into a wand of scowls. And so,
Nice.
Same thing, but then they scowl.
All right, I found
I
it.
think it's just so...
Here's some
Holy-
more great useless magic items. If you'd like to pepper them in throughout your campaigns, a sword that inflicts emotional damage.
Oh, God.
A hat that, when left alone with another hat, will mate and produce hybrid offspring.
Oh no! You just like leave
So-
them in a closet.
Yeah,
And
it's
then you open up. And go, oh no!
I'm a grandpa. So some of these are ones that I came up with. Some of them are ones that I, through an internet dive, just found on the
Mhm.
internet. So if these are yours, well done. Negative gold pieces.
Oh, God.
Like, it takes away from your total. Armor
It's
that
like the
becomes
anti-mana
more
version of
effective.
money.
Armor that becomes more effective the uglier it gets.
Oh, no. Oh.
An
I play way too much-
instructional
no.
tome on the secret language of ducks.
Yes.
A
Write
dagger
that
that
down.
glows in the presence of one particular goblin. Just one. Just Dave. Angry shoes. Whether they are inherently angry themselves or make the wearer angry is up to you.
Oh, I think it'd be funny.
And
Like,
a bow that is only accurate if you are blackout drunk.
that's hilarious.
Yeah, so
It's
those are
amazing.
some good ones.
That in a like an alchemy jug, broken combo.
Yes.
There's also a jug of sobriety where you, everything that you drink out of it like doesn't have any like alcohol specifically doesn't have any
That's the
effect on
cursed
you.
version, right?
Well, I mean, yeah.
You open a bottle
Unless
of beer and it's not beer.
right? I mean, it would still taste like beer. It just wouldn't get you drunk. But at that point, what's the point?
Yeah, what is the point?
All right. So anyhow, world building.
We're still on this magic item tangent.
Jesus
I
Christ.
just had a really good idea with the jug of sobriety. No, it's so you find it, and it's a cursed chalice, is what it is. And
Mhm.
so it's the person who has it. It's like, this thing's useless. You put wine in there, and it becomes water. But actually, it's like it's a magical chalice that can like clarify poison, and it has all these super useful
Oh.
Yeah.
abilities. But the person who has it has only tried to drink out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Just a thought. I like.
Yeah,
I,
That's good, that's good.
Yeah.
the sobriety one, it was explicitly stated to not work against poison.
well, that's lame,
Wow.
and they.
I mean, it was a common magic item.
I know.
I mean,
know.
all of them were meant to kind of be trolly.
But like you could have like because chalices tend usually, because of the Holy Grail, they tend to be a little bit up there in power level.
Yeah.
So
Okay,
it's
so
like,
a chalice for sure.
this could be like a really
Yeah.
like it's very magical. It like cure like the water in it like cures wounds or whatever, and
Mhm.
removes poison, does all this stuff. But the person who has it is like, I can't get drunk with it. It's
Right.
Yeah.
It's useless.
Right.
Yeah, wine to water, right? And so they're like, cursed.
Yeah.
Here, it's a cure.
Well, would it be wine to water or wine to grape juice?
Ooh,
Grape
grape juice.
I would do grape
like
juice.
flat
Yeah.
grape juice.
Dude, have you ever had have you ever drank wort? Well, probably not. I mean, if you brew beer, you've probably drank wort, and it's not great. It's unfermented it's unfermented beer, and it's just not that good. That being said, it is kind of fun to drink. In any case, so world building.
Back to what this is.
Jesus,
about.
Greg! So world building for a tabletop role playing setting, I think we've talked about it. It's kind of more wide open, and it's also more fly by the seat of your pants than I imagine writing is.
Also, there is I would almost say like the standards are lower, I guess, if that makes sense.
Super low.
Where it's
Well,
like
I guess not
if you're just
necessarily.
kind of pulling from if you're just pulling all the regular things from the Dungeon Master's Guide or whatever, or the Player's Handbook, it's like that's acceptable. That's okay. And it's expected.
Like,
but
good
when
enough.
Well, when you're like writing a book, then you're like, okay, I have to make I have to put myself into this now. I have to make this, something.
Plot holes are a lot harder to fill in retroactively.
Yeah.
You can't really retcon.
Are you talking like in a tabletop?
No, in writing versus
writing,
in a tabletop. Like
Yeah,
if there was something like you wanted
revise.
to set it up and you're like, all right, I don't have all the details yet, but I'm going to kind of plug this right now.
Yeah.
And then later on when it comes back into play in the story with the characters, then I'll have it a little more developed and we'll really launch it.
Yeah, that's something like you're definitely trying to orchestrate something something happening when you're writing. So like I would assume that when we're world building, we're like, man, that's a cool thing that will cause drama and conflict. Okay, it exists. But you're like, does this serve the plot that I have? Like,
oh yeah.
I know this is the thing that this character is gonna do. If I make this thing true, does that mess it up or not?
Right. It's like I imagine at that point it's kind of like the Star Wars The Last Jedi conundrum where it's like they could have just rammed ships all the time.
Yeah.
I imagine you may run into that more often. I also think that
because if in a tabletop game the players are going to figure that out and then
and then use it.
And then that's your world now.
Yeah, and then that's your
Everybody's just light speed jumping into ships.
Yeah.
I also
droids don't have souls, all right?
Just put a droid in the captain's seat. We're fine.
I mean, like no casualties. Just
true.
Yeah,
true.
We've had this conversation before at my house too.
Yeah. And so, kind of when you're world building for your book, how expansive do you generally get?
So I'm always trying to write with the overarching, like the big plot, the big arch. I watch a lot of anime, so there's always the one big arch that's, over all the seasons, it's the end game, it's the thing, it's the, whatever. And then, yes, there's little arches in between, and then there's almost like medium tier arches over the top of those. But everything, at least in my mind, has to in some way tie into the big overarching arc. So if I'm entering in a character, if I'm plugging in some sort of item or location or something, I'm always thinking, how is this going to tie into the major storyline of this book or of this writing?
And then I feel like, because if you don't do that, and this is, I don't have a lot of criticisms about The Witcher. Well, I do, but I mean, it's good enough and entertaining enough where I can just kind of write them off. But like, Witcher is like, there's a shit ton of names that they just throw out in like the conjunction of the spheres. Like, it doesn't matter. Nobody, like, you just say that and you're like, oh, how many spheres are there? Nobody gives a shit currently. Like, I imagine, you trying to tie everything in, like, it's so that you don't encounter that issue where you're just overloaded with like names and places and like, why does this exist? Like, how does this serve the plot?
I feel like people can feel like they need to fall into the Tolkien type world building where you have to have names for everybody and everything, and you need to have backstories for everyone and everything. Yeah, that's good. It might help you in terms of flushing out your world and making it more realistic for you as a writer, so that when you're writing, you are trying to keep everything sort of tied together. But, like one of your earlier podcasts, you talked about deities, and I was like, this is a great idea. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to start writing some deity lore for the cultures that are in my world. Will it ever come into play in my books? Probably not, because I don't think it's going to come into play in that major overarching arc. Yeah,
because obviously Tolkien is the one guy we're all going to talk about all the time. But like the Legendarium is great, and there's a whole bunch of cool stuff. But the narrative stands on its own regardless.
Yes.
And I think that's probably the thing that you need to, pay attention to the most. And like they go to Balin's tomb, like who's Balin? Well, he was a dwarf. And then you've read The Hobbit and you're like, oh, it was I get it. And he was a grandfather, a father. No, he was Gimli's dad. But that's not important, right? And like it's got a name, but the name doesn't distract from the main narrative, and it serves the narrative as a place where it goes. But if it was just randomly name dropped somewhere, like, why? It's like, oh yeah, there was this one time I just came from Balin's tomb.
Is this progressing the plot? Is it progressing character development? Is it progressing anything? And if it's not, if it's just for the sake of aesthetic or something cool that you just want to involve, like there's this meme where it's straight up just like, for the plot, I say, as I cut out a very interesting thing and put it aside. Like, it's everything you do is for the plot. You want to make sure that when a person picks up a book or picks up a magazine or anything and they're reading a story, whether it be a novel or a short story, you need to keep them turning the page. So if at any point in your story it becomes slow because you're weighing them down with a bunch of background information or detail that's really not relevant, but you think it's really cool and you want them to be excited about it, you can't force people to be excited by all that. Yeah. So you kind of have to be cutthroat and brutal with yourself as a world builder and as a creator. And
at what point do you... Because I've read a little bit of like, Russian literature, because I took a Russian lit class and, that kind of thing. And one of the things that I think it was Tolstoy was really good at was painting like just very vivid, beautiful pictures of like nature. It's like not always did nature like actually add to the plot, but that was one of the things he was really good at. One of the things that people got a lot out of his books, and it helped them turning the page that way. And so I think a person may also need to keep in mind that, even though me describing how beautiful the grass is as it sways, or the color of the leaves and how the dew, drops off or whatever, like that might not be super relevant to the plot. There may still be a place for it in like the narrative, just because it may be pleasing. If it's one of your characters reflecting on the beauty of what's around them in anticipation of, facing off against some adversary that's threatening to destroy all this beauty around them. That's a great way to tie it in. I see. I have a character do that at the very beginning of my story. She's reflecting on the beauty of her homeland and how she is not wanting to leave, but knowing that she needs to leave. So that's an opportunity for you as a writer to really like flex your poetic, creative, descriptive tendencies without doing it for really no purpose. Like it's contributing to the character's development and you as a reader becoming attached to them and being attached to what they're attached to. Yeah, and so it's really, looking through a character's eyes and being able to give them whatever details about the world, like you pepper in your world building like through their eyes, and also in a way that serves the plot in some way. And I suppose if they're looking like in horror as the siege engines of the Stackelbach or whatever, roll into the town of Gidlybap, or I don't know. This is how Darren thinks of names, everyone. Words, letters, throw them together. Yeah, yeah. It's like, okay, then I guess that makes sense. I know I'd probably have to take some writing classes in order to really get into it. For everybody out there, I have never taken a single writing class. Hey, there you go. Not at least traditionally. I did do a master class, had a couple with... Was that with Neil Gaiman? Yeah, Neil Gaiman did one, Margaret Atwood did one, and Judy Blume did one. So I did those three because those were the main fiction writers that were on there. I think James Patterson was on there too, but that's not my genre, so I didn't watch his. But that's about as far as I've gotten ever in however many years I've been writing. I've never taken a creative writing class. Yeah, and I think that's, I don't know, is kind of the same way that D&D and like DMing does. Like, it just kind of speaks to the open-ended nature, or like the accessibility of it. Like, you don't need to be a freaking like academic. You don't need to be an English major. You don't need to be a literature major. You don't need to go to school for this. If it's something where, like with me, I just started writing at one point because I wanted to. Exactly. Usually reading and writing go hand in hand. So if as a kid you were one of those kids that stayed inside like me and read all the time, I have a hunch you're probably writing down some scribbles too. Yeah, I played a lot of video games and I like to hang out with friends, and therefore I DM. Also, I'm, white and middle class and from the Midwest, so we checking a lot of boxes here. That being said, obviously, it's just completely open, so like anyone can do it. And I think it's one of those things where once you get off your ass and like start writing, it's easier to keep writing. Yes, yeah, it's definitely like it's not a... I was going to make a George R.R. Martin joke. Oh God, yes. Anyways, continue. Yeah, it's not like some people say if you don't use it, you lose it type things. I don't think, at least with writing or creativity or like world building and DMing, it's almost something inherent. Like it's in your blood, it's in your DNA. It happens. Yeah, like I could go probably for months without writing. I have before gone months without writing because I get caught up in other things. Life, for example. Right? Fourth quarter sucks, and that's why we don't
Yeah.
make podcasts in fourth quarter.
Like that's how it is with any hobby.
Yeah.
Like if it's really something that you love and you're all about it, like yeah, you could not do it for a solid half a year and come back to it, and it might take you a couple days, but then all of a sudden it just pulls over you and it just washes over you, and it feels like you never left.
Yeah, and that's man. Now I want to start writing some stuff. I did write like just like I don't know, a couple pages maybe of a perspective book or something. But then I like fell off the horse. But it was really cool while it lasted.
Yeah,
I'll have you know.
it's a great
but
outlet.
and it was just one of those things where I don't think I ever like got momentum with it. And I think that creative momentum is also a big thing.
Oh yeah, I mean there have been days where I try to sit down and write something and I'm like, this is not happening today. I don't have this. But then other days I literally run home from work and I put hands up in the faces of people who try to talk to me because I'm like, if you talk to me right now, I'm going to lose what's in my head and I'm going to murder you.
Yeah. Do you have anything that you bring with you? I know Greg's got, or at least he's talked about, like a notebook that he carries with him, or I mean his phone.
Yeah, I have.
Now everything's digital, but yeah. I make sure I have notes, so as soon as I come up with something, it can be put somewhere.
Yep, I keep my phone with me. Even if it's like, I've literally done it with names. Big one is names of cities, names of people, anything like that.
You mean Biggly Blop? Isn't it
yeah,
a good name?
That's a great one. I get a lot of my names when I'm driving from city signs and street signs.
I see.
So if you read my books, or because I drew a map for my story as well.
Yep.
A lot of the names of cities and villages and towns on my map are names of actual places in the Midwest.
Nice.
Because I drove past them at one point and thought, you know what? Blue Earth is the name of a real place, and that's a really cool name. I'm going to put that in here. My characters might not ever go there, but it's a sweet name to have on a map.
Yeah, and in the event that you need to like pull some plot relevant information, boom, there you go.
I have a big list of like, as I'm out and about in my life, just going around, if I see something cool, I quick put it in my phone, and then when I get home, I have a big document on my computer where I just dump names.
I think sometimes what I do, if I'm not just mashing sounds together, is I like what I did with like elven naming conventions back in the day, which I've now lost, which makes me really mad. I like broke down a name and I'm like, oh, there's gonna have like these ones have this ending and this one has this ending, and that was just a lot of work. But especially for, I don't know why I mentioned that, but I guess that was just a very like methodical and mechanical way to like make names. Whereas another thing that a person could do is like, I mean, I guess this is a very Western centric way of looking at it, but like, where did like first and last names come from? Well, first names, not entirely sure. I mean, either named after words or gods or, I don't know, well wishes or religious figures.
Latin roots.
But like, where did those names come from? Whatever. I don't really care. But
all words are made up.
Yeah. They're just sounds. Whole bunch of them all together. But like last names came from like Smith. Like at some point in time, they were a blacksmith, or like their dad's grandpa, whatever was a blacksmith, right? Yeah. Yep. Smith, Johnson, John's son, Bjergson, Bjerg's son. Like you break them down like to that level, and they get, I guess, not
they're
less
simplified.
Interesting. Yeah, they're simplified. Like my last name is something similar. I thought it was like really neat for a while, and I realized what it was. I'm like, wow, that's a really common last name, but it's German, therefore
it's exotic to you.
Yeah, and I was like, well, my last name is like so unique, and then I discovered what it was German for, and I was like, oh, well, I'm officially not that interesting.
Yeah.
But it still like sounded unique, right? And so, like just the mundane names that pervade like the real world, and how they seem interesting and normal. I think you can pull that same thing, and you're like, oh well, like the suffix ton on a fucking town is just like an easier way to say town, right? And so
Harborton is like Harbor Town.
Yeah,
they just shortened it because we're lazy when we come to speaking.
Yeah, or like, I don't know, if you were gonna say like Johnston or whatever, like no, it's just Johnstown because John was probably the person who founded it,
yeah.
Right? Or they're like made after last name. And so I think once people get like too when you think too hard and you want to make it like really realistic is sometimes where you might spin your wheels a little bit.
Yeah, you get a little caught up when in reality, if you look at our own world, you're like, wow, everything's very simple.
Yeah, you just drive down the highway and then, maybe splice a couple words together, just take it wholesale.
Absolutely.
Something that I found too is I'll write down names and I'll think they're kind of silly or contrived to start with, and then I'll come back to them half a year later having to forgot about it, and then instead there's a different part of my brain's working. It's one that isn't. It's less self-referential, because instead of it being like, oh, I made that, instead I'm like, oh, that's a thing. Like, that's something I discovered now, even though I made it, and I instantly accept it a lot more, which, especially when you're GMing, I find that, like, you have to be confident when you're saying some weird ass name too, or everyone's just gonna look at you and get like and make fun of it.
Be like, is that really the name of that place?
Yeah. And so that's something that I found is that I'll come up with a ton of stuff and I'm like, okay, that isn't really cool. And then months later, I'll be like, oh no, that's super cool. I get it now. Like, I get why I thought that was really neat, and then I was just self-conscious about it. And that's something that I found often. You know
what I realized about Beehive Rat people?
Oh, I came up with a name for them.
Well, what did you come up with? Racky. I came up with like Scug.
Yeah. Wait, what'd you come up with, Jared?
Scug.
Scug?
Yeah, because I listened to an episode about cannibalistic squirrels, or not cannibalistic squirrels, but squirrels eating meat in general. And apparently Scug was like a common name for squirrel back in the day. And so I was like, Beehive Rat people aren't squirrels, but Scug has like that very guttural kind of sound to it, and that could probably be
so there's
like
a real world word.
Yeah,
just like, I'm just gonna take
I had no idea what the word was. It was just Scug, and I was like, that's a dope word. And so it's been growing on me a lot more. But I think Racky's really freaking cool too.
Yeah, so I got my word because I was playing Vermintide 2, and the dwarf in there just said some stuff in Dwarvish. And in Warhammer's made up dwarf language, and it just said Racky, and I was like, I like that. And it was, maybe there's some context because they're like in like a Skaven like mine sort of complex, right? And so I at first I thought like, oh wait, is this a dwarvish word for Skaven? Am I just ripping this off? And I like looked up like Warhammer lore and made sure that it wasn't, and like, no, it was like a pejorative term in Warhammer Dwarvish, and I was like, sweet, I can use this. All right, they're called Racky.
Yeah, and I think too, like, reminding me that they're called Skaven in Warhammer. I wonder if Skaven came in some way, shape, or form from Scug or a derivative thereof. I don't know. I don't really care. I think Scug's a cool word, and authors or writers can, call anything they want, and for whatever reason, and it doesn't really matter as long as it's not copyrighted.
Yeah, please don't do that.
As long as it's not infringing.
Yeah, don't do that.
Reminds me of Matt Colville's. He in his book, he's like, yeah, this might, fit really well in a campaign setting where the sun doesn't shine and is black all the time. Talking about Dark Sun.
Yep.
And I was just like, that's so petty that he can't like publish that, but
and he probably can, but it's just like, I might as well be safe.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, at that point, fair use.
But I also
just referencing something that could.
Also, I think it's humorous when he says stuff like that.
I think it adds to the charm.
Yeah, that is something that I've realized, like getting more into RPG books, that they're sort of weird, like who their audience is for, like especially like an RPG book for like a dungeon master, is that part of it is like, okay, I actually have to tell you the information of what's going on, and the other part of it is like, it has to be fun reading this, like I have to entertain you. And so I think it's that's a skill where you have to be informative and concise enough and precise enough, but also have something that's fun to read.
And that kind of that brings me to a thought about kind of narrative voice between DMing versus like writing. Obviously incredibly informal when you're DMing, but I've also read some like really informally written books, namely The Princess Bride, which if you haven't read it, like it's kind of not what you think. It's also kind of hilarious. Just like the whole thing is just wrapped up in this like weird, like made up historical background, and it's hilarious. And the author is just is so funny. But there's also a time in like DMing where you do get really narrative. And I just kind of am curious, like when you're writing, do you try to have like the same voice every time, or is there sometimes a like, if you were to try to like get silly or like have a comic relief moment, how do you write that in, and does that change the way that you write it at all?
I think any creative writing professor or instructor would tell you that you need to pick your one voice and you need to stick with it.
Yeah.
At least if not just for a single, like, okay, at least in one story, in one book or one story, you need to have one voice. And then, hey, if you want to write another book where you have a more comical or lighthearted narrative voice, that's great. I think the big challenge for a lot of people who are writing is they don't know what their voice is.
Yeah.
And that's the never-ending battle for every person who's a writer. That's why you go out and you read a million books, because you start seeing a conglomerate of what everybody's voices are.
That's what I like. That's what I like.
Yep.
That's what
and
I
you
like.
can pick and choose.
Yeah.
And you take bits and pieces from, Neil Gaiman. You take bits and pieces from J.K. Rowling. You take bits and pieces from whoever the hell else that you like as a writer, and you can be like, I like that part of that and that part of that. If I blend those together and I keep consistent with it, then hey, suddenly I've got my own narrative voice, and it ties in all the various things that I like. I'm not a super flowery writer. I don't get really uber descriptive. I tend to be a lot more like to the point, and here's this, let's move on to the action type thing. Mostly because I'm always afraid that if I get too long and too prosy, people are going to get tired and they're going to start skipping paragraphs. Which I do. I will admit, I skip paragraphs in books.
You want to avoid yourself.
I jump to where the dialogue is, because that's where plot
you get
development
your fun,
is happening.
Yeah, that's where you get your kicks out of.
Right. So, I like to have a nice balance between being a more serious voice, where in scenarios and situations where it is serious, to have a more serious narrative voice. And yes, you can lace in little bits of comic relief. I have a character who is literally a clown. That is part of her personality, is that she doesn't really take things seriously.
Yep.
And she is the person who will say the inappropriate thing at the wrong time, but that's just who she is.
Yep.
So that's how I tie in.
That's how you kind of like squeak in, like, oh man, I really gotta get some silliness
lighten
out.
it up a little bit, get a little more lighthearted. Okay, I have a character for that.
Yeah. It has to be through. It has to be through someone that exists in the narrative.
Because I feel like if I were to start writing, that would be my biggest hurdle, because I, in general, am an incredibly informal person.
You can have an informal narrative voice. That can be your voice.
Yeah, I suppose that's right.
It's your feature.
It's my feature.
Yeah. People read your stories and they feel as though they are hearing them straight from you.
Yeah.
Just a one-on-one conversation.
Well, I hope that's how my DMing comes out too.
Yes,
because most of the time it is kind of a one-on-one conversation.
I prefer.
So all the other people are effing off with their phones. I'm not, man.
Do you have a favorite player?
Do I have a favorite player?
You don't have to answer that. You're not
supposed to.
You're not supposed to answer that.
I think it depends on the character, and
is this in your Wednesday campaign?
It varies by campaign and like who is. I think generally it would be like who is consistently like looking at me and participating the most. So yeah, I may be throwing some shade right now.
Whoever's paying attention.
Darren just wants attention. That's it.
Yeah, that's it. That's why I DM, because I'm the attention whore.
So this is how you get good things from the DM.
Yeah,
at least if Darren is the DM.
Look at me a lot and shut the hell up. Until yeah, that's basically it. But I feel like, picking and choosing narrative voices, I imagine, prior to basically Dungeons and Dragons going to Twitch, essentially, it was probably really hard to have DMs to choose from and be like, oh, I like the way that guy does this. I like the way that guy does this. I think currently it's just basically it's like Matt Mercerism or whatever. Everyone's like, Critical Role is so good. I gotta be just like Matt Mercer. It's like, no. That's his voice.
You don't have to be just like the most successful or the most popular person. Yeah,
I mean,
they're
like-
popular and successful because people tend to like maybe what they do. But that doesn't mean that you as a fresh start and your voice aren't also going to be popular. Maybe not to a larger group, maybe to a smaller one,
Right.
and then it grows.
Exactly. And like to think that a narrative voice in any, you know, capacity doesn't like grow and evolve is just, you know, complete BS.
Oh, I
But,
can
like,
tell you it does.
Yeah. And
As-
the other thing too is that like, you know, narrative voice styles, no matter, you know, what you're narrating, are complemented by like what you're good at. If you're good at detail, like you may want to have like a very formal way, but if you're just a naturally funny person, not saying I am, but like if I was like really naturally funny, perhaps like an informal, you know, approach would be necessary or would be better than like a really formal approach. Unless you happen to be really good at it, you can just really punch in with the comedy,
Yeah.
right in a well-constructed academic paragraph.
I think
I
the
don't know.
main takeaway is that do not, if you are being creative as either a DM or as a writer or as anything like that, where you're doing any kind of world building or storytelling, don't force yourself into the framework that already exists based on what you think is the right way to do it.
Yeah.
If you're like, oh, you know, Matt Mercer, he's the best. I should be like him. Don't force it.
Yeah, and don't
Be-
force anyone else to do that.
Yeah, and don't force anybody else to. Just like, oh, you know, Neil Gaiman, I love his voice. I want to write just like him. He's really unique. His
Yeah.
is fantastic. Don't force yourself to be like that unless it comes naturally.
Yeah, I also think that and maybe I read this on Reddit somewhere, but the idea of like trying to be completely original, where it's like I want to, you know, keep myself to be like just the best version of me, and the only way that I can do that is to not take anything from anybody else.
Impossible.
Yeah, absolutely impossible. And not to mention, like, yeah, you're just gonna be spinning wheels forever because it's like, at least me, I'm not a very original person most of the time. I'm very good at like taking someone else's idea and just kind of like twisting it or like collaboratively coming up with
Putting a
something.
different filter on it.
Yeah, which is why I love Greg, because Greg's, to me, seems much more original than I am, but he probably just steals from stuff that I haven't read yet.
I mean, that's all originality is.
Yeah.
At this point in human existence, there are not many stories that haven't been told yet.
yeah, everything's
just
ripped off
a-
for Shakespeare.
Or like Hero's Journey or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
it's just a matter of how you're going to tell it.
Yeah.
And that's how you make a new story.
Yeah.
I am under no impression that my story that I am writing is unique.
Mm-hmm.
I am sure there are a million other people out there who have thought of a story like this, written a story like this. It's not original, but it's original because I'm writing it and I'm writing it with my
Mhm.
flavor, my narrative, my ideas. And
Yeah,
that makes it mine.
absolutely. You know what I think would be an interesting intersection between, you know, DMing and just writing in general, and you know, we kind of not alluded to it, but with Matt Colville's Strongholds and Followers, like, imagine, I think it'd be interesting at the very least to write a module where you kind of like marry those things together and just see, I don't know, how it turns out. I feel like you would have to have more of a technical voice in that, but I think it'd be really cool, similar to what Matt Colville does, to have like a more informal, fun, like let's hang out voice. And I wonder how it would turn out between like would it be a functional module, or would it almost be as much fun to read as it would be to, you know, run? I wonder if there's anything that exists or could exist like that. But granted,
Absolutely, but you would definitely be constricted in like the tone of what the actual story was, because if you're going to have this really happy, informal writing style or voice, like the adventure itself should be similar to that too.
yeah,
Yeah, it should match.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can't tell a really dark story and have.
like
Well,
these-
I guess
You can.
I guess you
but-
could. You could tell a very dark story and be. But hey, that's
Maybe
an
that's the
interesting
only way to
combination, and
tell
that's
a
your
dark
narrative
story.
voice.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so I guess I was just thinking about that. Like, I wonder how much writing, and I've never written a module, would be, you know, more like a formal technical aspect, or how much juice or how much like informality or just like personality you could get into it until it doesn't become a functional book anymore.
So I pay attention to the old school Renaissance, which has a lot more of this sort of informal and indie vibe to it, and there is absolutely like a spectrum of how much voice there is in in a book, and there's certain writers, like, so there's someone named Patrick Stewart, who's not the Patrick Stewart you're thinking of, that writes OSR modules, and one of the complaints / features of his writing style is that it's paragraphs. It's just, like a bunch of very flowery prose describing something, and that's what you get. That's what you pay for. And he's kind of known for being long-winded when the rest of the scene is usually trying to be extremely terse. And so that kind of voice, it 100% exists in at least in the more indie scene for tabletop stuff. And
I'm gonna look some of that stuff up.
Yeah, and like I've shown you the game Troika, which we haven't played it.
Louise,
I haven't played it yet with you
Seems
all,
to be
but I hope to.
Crazy.
But that game would work really well for a really informal writing style, because it's very zany and you're supposed to be surprised, and like that's what it's about. And so it could totally work, but it also could totally not work.
Yeah, and I think you're writing for an audience, whether it's the audience at large or the niche audience you've cultivated because you have a following that really likes your particular style, and I think that kind of extends to the table as well. And I think depending on, and I don't have enough experience with basically non-Wizards of the Coast like modules and stuff to really know. I mean, I have one indie one. I've got a Fairy Fire.
And you have
book.
Warnheim.
And I have Warnheim, which I don't use nearly as much as I should. But I've got, or I wonder how that would influence, the table at play. And I think it'd be really interesting for like a DM to be reading a Patrick Stewart, but deliver more of like a nuts and bolts like Jim Murphy game.
I think
that would be interesting, and see if that would even be possible.
That they would. That you would be influencing each other, obviously. And I also think that if you were in alignment, that you would probably enjoy it a lot more.
Yeah,
because I think so too. I know that a lot of times I just give me the juice. Tell me what it is. When I'm searching through.
So right now I'm running the Tower of Xenopus out of my phone, basically, because I downloaded the 1977 module. And I basically cull through that, and I'm like, okay, I think I can read this out loud without giving up too much. But I'm like, just put it in an off-color block of text, man. I want to know what I should say.
I am actually impressed that when I realized that this, so in our game, sorry, we're getting a little off topic here, but in our game, I was basically like, my character, who's a diviner wizard, was talking to another local wizard, and I was like, tell me about any wizard shit around here. I want the wizard shit. And so I was like, he was like, oh, there's this abandoned tower, and there's probably nothing cool there. And I'm like, see ya.
I'm going
there. Yeah. And so, and I'm assuming that you were then like, shit, what
yeah, that was exactly what I did.
And I'm impressed that you're running it off your phone, because that's not easy.
Well, that's a complete, I mean, just hearing that where Darren maybe had to create something in the immediate present time.
But I didn't create it. I stole it from the internet.
Still, but you had to think, and you'd have some foresight here to pull it in and create it in the moment and deliver it for your players in that moment, or at least maybe for the next session or something. That doesn't happen for me.
Yeah. Well,
yeah, because you don't have.
Because there's no immediacy.
Yeah, and that's honestly the best part about GMing, is when it's like a flow state kind of thing, where you're like, I have to get this, and you're like you're laying those tracks, right? And I've given this example before, I believe, when the players in my game were like, oh, let's go to the brothel, and I was immediately like on phone and as they're
I expected them to go to the merchant's quarter. Why are they going to the brothel?
But as they're talking to each other about are we gonna do this or not, I just have my phone up and I'm just random brothel generator, and first post on Reddit comes up, click it, and I'm like, these are great. These are great.
Mhm.
Like the little table that they have. I didn't roll on the table.
You just
but
pick
I
what you
just
like.
picked what I liked, and I was like, I got this, and it was a ton of fun, and it worked really well.
In that moment where your characters are walking down the street, you're
Yep.
like, all right, let's get this.
Right?
Yep.
And that's the difference too between, you know, delivering that narrative and, you know, once you say it, then it becomes stone in the world.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you know, you're
You have
pulling out the
it's
verisimilitude.
a lot harder to do redos.
Oh, it's so bad.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I
Like I
but
said,
You still can.
you just
but-
got to get buy-in from your players, and at that
Yeah.
point, they're like, "Okay, I get it."
Yeah.
But I feel like, you know, that's the difference. Where, you know, if you were to, I don't know, write your characters naturally into a brothel, like, you have to tie that. Like, if you ran D&D like you wrote a book, you would have to tie that brothel in somehow with like the overarching story,
Yeah.
which
or at least
would be
somehow
neat,
tied
but-
into the characters. Like maybe
Yeah.
it's somewhere that been before. Maybe it's somewhere they have a secret room below that the shop owner lets them keep
or
because they have an agreement or something. Like it just needs to be something.
yeah, or maybe like I'm not a writer, I haven't taken it, whatever. Maybe they're going there. Maybe the reason that exists is because they are looking for a respite from what, like, you know, the rest of the overarching thing, where it's like, you know, they have sought a safe space and they have found this bubble
Yes.
that they have
A
like
dark corner
intentionally-
where they can kind of tuck away and
No.
hide from whoever's chasing them or whatever.
Yeah, and it's like for a brief and shiny moment. It's like Tom Bombadil's place in The Lord of the Rings, where it's like, this place doesn't serve any purpose at all except for maybe a little character progression.
And it is nice.
Koval has a pretty long video about Tom Bombadil.
Yeah, it
He
just,
does.
like-
It's actually really good. Would recommend.
And even if you want to include things like that and you're like, well, it doesn't really have anything to do with the plot. It doesn't really have anything to do with the overarching goal or our end game here, but you want to include it, find a way to include it. If you're
Yeah,
really
well-
set on it and you're like, this is something I want to be in here, then hey, it's
You have to go backwards.
Yeah, it's a way for you to sort of prompt yourself and be like, all right, I want this to be here. So this is going to inspire me to create other things and other threads that I'm going to weave in. And suddenly this little brothel or whatever is a little nugget in the story.
Yeah, there you go. It's like it's basically the entire thing is the principle of like Chekhov's gun, where it's like, if you see a gun in the first act, you better go off in the third. Otherwise, you just have like annoying red herrings that nobody cares about, like names in The Witcher. Still mad about that, but that's fine. I wonder. I'm trying to think if there's any other kind of like world building stuff. I guess.
Do you have any advice? Do you have any things that are like when, like, stuff that just brings you inspiration? Obviously, we have the road signs, but anything else that you see?
Oh, yeah.
Or like I spend a lot of time on Wikipedia. I like getting a lot of inspiration from real life and from history. Do you have anything like that?
I usually, one of the big things that I fall back on is mythology.
Yep.
Yeah.
And not just your big standard houses like Norse and Greek and Roman, but get into the really...
Going in deep.
Go to the small ones. Go to the little local ones, and you'll find stories about one of the really fun sort of creative outlets that I did based off of your guys' podcast, the episode, the deity one, was doing a creation myth for one of my characters. Her name is Claria. She is from an island nation, so she's very seafaring. She's the clown one who always kind of is a joker and says kind of the inappropriate things at a bad time.
Classic surfer mentality.
Right. And
Tropes are a good thing.
I was like, her deities, that house of gods and goddesses, they're not going to be... If that is the type of person she is, and she comes from a culture like that, I'm guessing that culture is not going to have a lot of super serious gods and goddesses about, like this is the god of destruction, and this is if that is part of the culture, then it needs to be woven into that culture because it produced a person like Claria.
Mm-hmm.
So what kind of a culture and what kind of a mythology, a creation deity or whatever would have produced a culture like that, would have produced a character like that. So my gods and goddesses are, yes, I have a goddess of creation, but I also have the god of love is also the god of the stars and sailing. I have twin goddesses of joy, laughter, and youthful life. And they're also the goddesses of auroras.
Dope.
So
yeah, because
things like
that's super
there's
cool.
a god of fertility, passion, and fishing.
Yeah,
Like
makes sense to me.
if I'm gonna have a character like Clara who's very relaxed and sort of laissez-faire and go with the flow type person, I'm guessing her culture would have had some pretty cool deities, not like your standard ones. They would have been more, get outside the Greek and the Roman and the Norse and go to those little ones where there's a god of roadside pebbles. Who the hell knows? Like,
yes.
The idea that I had for her was that, here are the major deities. These are the ones that I came up with. But then I literally put a little asterisk there that says, there are tons more for every random thing you can think of.
Mm-hmm.
But these are the main ones.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But, Clara is the type of person where she's going to be like, oh yeah, we've got a rip in the sail there. Curses, shakes hand at God of, bad timing or something. Yeah. Like, they have one for everybody.
And whatever, Kalos, or gosh darn it, is like, the God of bad timing or like, bad fortune, like version of that, where it's like, oh, Skip Lita Bop. What a guy.
Another one that I did was so that's all from mythology, so I'll dive into mythology and I'll look at really small local cultures and legends and stuff like that. Like I said, street signs. I'm never the driver in a car. I'm always a passenger, so I get really bored and I look outside and I look at street signs. That's a great one.
I look down at my phone or Switch. So.
Yeah, maps are a good one. My dad is a geography teacher, or he was for like 30 plus years in the public school system. He's retired recently, but he's a geography teacher, so I grew up on maps. So looking at random parts of the world. That's a great one. Just pick a spot on the world and zoom in. And you'll find really cool names. You'll find cool locations and setups and things like, wow, I didn't know you could have that right next to that.
Yeah.
And that'll help.
Yeah. Something that I find myself doing probably more often than I should is like delving way too deep into like how things
Destiny lore.
No, yes. Destiny
lore.
That. There's not a lot to it. It's mostly surface level. It's like an inch and a half deep, all right? The half inch is what nobody else cares to look at. The rest is, whatever. In any case, what I delve, like, sometimes too deep into is, like, how, especially when I'm building maps, like, how are cities made? Like, how does a city grow from, like, this to this? Or like generally, how does a city expand? Like, how does city planning work? And, like, ancient civilizations. And, like, I do a lot of research where it's like, okay, so a city this big, how many like acres of farmland should they reasonably have at, their farming capacity? And I think a lot of that's really useful, but I think a lot of it's wasted fucking time. Where it's like sometimes that's just the way, like, does it need to be practical? Sure. I think there's a Neil deGrasse Tyson quote where it's like, get the facts straight and then distort them at your leisure. Which is
you have to know the rules to break them.
Yeah, there you go.
Yep.
And sometimes like if I'm trying to build a city, and I don't know how exactly I got on this tangent, but when I'm trying to like build a city, I'll get so caught up in the weeds that like oh no, there's so much to think about. Where it's like, okay,
you're not a city planner. You don't need to think about plumbing.
And weird shit happens in cities. Like you said, you zoom in on a map. It's like, why is there a brothel right next to a church? Well, I don't know.
That's just how it
there
happens.
Just is. It exists. Whatever. Maybe there's a connection there. Maybe they just hate each other from across the street.
Yep.
That could be a fun thing to
write about. It's a great story.
Exactly.
Nuns just shake their fists across the street.
Yeah. Curse you. And then like the male and female strippers are just like wiggling their bodies across the street through the window. I don't know. And so yeah, I guess as far as like drawing more inspiration from like the normal world, where it's like, like things get weird, and so like if your stuff doesn't make sense, there's a lot of stuff that doesn't make sense. Yeah. And like
the world's messy.
Yeah.
You don't need to be perfectly organized and clean in everything you do. You can be a little messy too. It's fine.
Right? And it's just like, well, why is this the way it is? It doesn't make any sense. Yeah, well, people were stubborn and they decided not to change. And that's the story.
That's the reason. Yeah. You can give that as the reason.
Yeah, and that could, I don't know, inform more stuff, but it could just be right there. And as long as if you talk about it and it serves the plot, then it's worth talking about. Or
also, one of my favorite things is to pull inspiration from the people around me. I know everybody says that. It's super stereotypical to be like, I'm inspired by my friends and family. Like, yes, everybody says that.
I'm inspired by the crazy people coming through Target.
Yeah, honestly, right, like that. Like, you must see so many people that walk through your doors every single day.
You know how many homeless people I can put into my campaign that are actual copy paste from homeless people that I see?
Yeah.
A lot.
And they're fantastic characters. They're full of life and personality.
Yeah.
Like,
you start talking to them, and sometimes they're just rambling crazy, but there's a story behind those people.
Yes. Even little things. Like, my mom is over 60 now. She's gonna hate me for saying that, but
you look great.
She honestly does. Mama Sherry, you look great. I hope I look as good as you when I'm your age. She's from a different era. Like, she is from a different generation. Mm-hmm. So things that she says, phrases, I don't know, things that she knows, I have no experience with. One of the things that she says, if you say something and she doesn't know what you're talking about, she'll say, "How much?"
What? That doesn't make any sense, Mom
right?
Sherry.
It doesn't make any sense, but I loved it so much. I tied it into one of my characters,
one of
Claria.
Your beloved characters?
I keep coming back to Claria because she's one of my favorites. So when Claria hears something that she's like flabbergasted by or is like, "That's ridiculous," she goes, "How much?" Because her mind is always ticking around money and cost.
Oh.
So it's like,
I see.
Well, we need to get across the mountains and it's 400 miles. I'm sorry, how much? Like, I have to...
400 of the miles.
400 of the miles.
400
or
much.
like, well, so-and-so owns this building. I'm sorry, how much? Like, it's just little things that people around you that they say, and you can just steal it from them because they're your family and you can steal from them.
Yeah, and... yeah, like just I think also like little mannerisms or like little anecdotal stories that you get, from work or someone told you a fun thing. If you just need to like setting dress a little bit, I think pulling those are like hilarious. Like some person at work today had a really, really awkward experience with like some like really like I want to say like white guilt kind of stuff, where maybe not white guilt, but just like really awkward white people stuff where it's like there was a guest shopping in like the Black History Month section, and this team member went up and it was just like really awkward. And this is it was told to me from the guest who it happened to. He and whoever was with, assumingly both Black, were shopping in that area, and like a team member comes up and they're like, "Can I? You need sorry." And just kind of like noped off for a sec, and like a few minutes later or whatever, I'm not done yet. And she comes back, she's like, "I'm sorry, that was super awkward. I wasn't, taught or trained how to like help Black people in the Black History Month section."
What?
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm
treat
just like,
people like people.
Exactly.
Walk up to them and say,
it's not
"Hi, can
that
I help
fucking
you?"
hard. But
your store is great.
It's
a
so
riot.
hilarious. But just like I and I'm sure I do like stupid things, and my boss is like, "Darren, I cannot believe you did that." Actually, no, I know he said that before. But it's just like that, and like that really awkward. It's like, does that actually happen? Yes, it happens.
Does.
And so like, if you need to like inform, about, I don't know, like a setting or a city or like the overall like vibe of a city, where it's like, yeah, you put that in there, and it's like, yeah, this is this like fake woke, like super like apologist area, and this is how and you like show them by pulling that, or in the case of like a person from a different era or from a different time, you're how much. And I think that's, I don't know, like getting inspiration just from like little bits and pieces of things that you see out and about is always a great way to, I mean, both add character but also like humanize and ground your setting or your narrative.
Yeah, every story that was ever written was written by somebody who lived in this world and was surrounded by these people and by this planet. So every story came from here in some way, shape, or form. So just open your eyes, pay attention, look around you. You will find inspiration just like everybody else did.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't have a whole lot of other questions. Lauren, do you have any questions?
No, I don't
feel
think
like
so.
the podcast generally answers the questions that you would have had.
Yeah,
but in the event that you ever spring any other questions, you know the email address.
Oh,
you
yeah.
also see me almost every other week.
Yeah, I also have your phone number.
Yeah, and you have my phone number. We have good.
If you don't answer your phone, I have
And address.
And
yeah,
address.
I know where you live.
Yeah. You know where I work? I think you probably know where I'm from. Shit.
I'm bad with backgrounds.
Huh? She
Which
doesn't
is-
know where I'm
Which
from.
is horrible for a writer.
You
I am
don't
bad with
know where I
backgrounds.
went to high school or where I go to Christmas with my family.
All that matters is the present.
All that
right?
matters is the
Oh,
present.
yeah.
I live in the now. Thank you. I'm a butterfly on the winds of time. Thank you.
Okay, Darren.
Steal that one.
You know what? I might.
You might. All right. Well, I think that kind of wraps it up. Thank you, Lauren, so much for being here and being part of the
Absolutely.
last 2 episodes and for kind of imparting upon us the knowledge that you have gleaned from your experience.
Very
in writing.
limited knowledge.
Yeah,
But
that's
you're
all right.
welcome.
Well, hey, I think this is a much more informal and cool way to do an interview than if I interviewed like a literature academic,
Oh yeah.
right? I feel like
Yeah.
that would be
You
almost
either get one or the
unbearable.
other with literature academics. You get someone who's super excited to talk to you and is super fun and casual, and you're like, oh my god, I love you. Or you get the stuffy person who takes
Yep.
himself way too seriously, and you're like, this isn't fun.
Right. Please stop.
Yeah.
Well, in any case, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Like we said, if you want to find Lauren, you can find her on Inkshares. Is there INKSHARES?
Yeah, just how it sounds.
Right?
Inkshares.com. You can search for the title of the book, which is The Elements Trilogy. Actually, I think it's under The Elements Dissension, because that is the title of book one.
Ooh.
Yes, it's a trilogy, so that's book one.
In that case, take a look at that. If you have any other questions, you can filter them through us to Lauren. Obviously, thelorefoundry@gmail.com. Lorefoundry.com is our website, which I think probably needs some updating.
Probably.
We haven't touched it in a while. I think some things got weird.
You know, I think last time I looked at it, it wasn't working, and I was like,
Yeah. Hey, if you can look
We
us
got
up
it.
anywhere.
We got it for free from a friend.
Exactly. And I think he paid for the domain too.
Yeah,
actually.
thanks, man.
What a guy.
gift.
What, yeah.
In any case, we love you with our whole hearts. Well,
Darren
at least
does.
some of us. Yeah.
Yeah.
Greg's indifferent. I love everything with my whole heart. Thank you so much for listening. Bye.
Darren just peace signed in the air.
I
I think he forgot for a moment that this was an audio.
Nux.
Yeah, and Knox. Okay, there we go. Thanks everyone.
You're like, oh my ears.
Is that
Oh,
water? Is
water?
that seriously what that is?
No, that's a Wowda.
This
That's a
is
Soylent.
water. Just
That's
water
Greg's
that's out there.
excuse for a diet.
What is
But
it?
he also makes it's liquid.
protein
It's
shake.
liquid food.
You just eat that instead of lunch?
He drinks it instead of lunch.
Don't have to, if I get
Greg eats once a week at Dungeons and Dragons. All the rest
Oh
of it
no,
is
this is up to
drink.
you. It's your job to feed him.
No, Greg sometimes eats solid food, at work or at home or something. He tells us that. And I did actually watch him eat a banana today.
Oh, that's
I mean, it was
exciting.
weird. I was watching a little bit too closely, but yeah, it looked like he's well practiced in masticating boluses and then swallowing them.